All right, welcome everyone to this week's Xojo webinar. I'm Paul Lefevre, the Xojo Developer Evangelist, and this week we have a special guest speaker. Bob Keeney of BKeeney Software is going to be giving you all an overview of his BKeeney Short project, or product, I should say, which is a reporting enhancement for Xojo. So Bob, the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. As Paul said, my name is Bob Keeney, and I am the founder of BKeeney Software. We've been Xojo consultants for, well, officially 13 years, but we worked for a couple years before that, before we incorporated. And we've got clients all over the world and done, I can't tell you how many projects at this point. Most of them database related. And one of the common things that is in most projects is reporting. Now, reporting is one of those things that is kind of special, and there's not really a whole lot of options in the Xojo world. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of shorts. So let's start off with what a typical report is. And when we say typical, this is what most of clients want. Every modern application wants to see this. So they want to see an on-screen representation. You can call this a print preview or whatever you want, but basically it needs to be what you see is what you get, or as close to it as possible. Now I say that because different resolutions can mean different things, and text doesn't always like to agree. So you want it to be as close as possible. And why do we have a print preview? Well, one, if you're doing a query against a database and you're pulling a million rows, you don't want to print a 1,000-page report. So you want to be able to see that on screen, adjust your filters, do all that sort of stuff long before you print it. And then obviously you want to print the report, and what you've printed needs to be at the resolution of the printer and look pretty much what you saw on screen. And then what you want to do then is be able to export it. And these days, most people want to do an export to, like, say, PDF. Some people want to do CSV and other things like that, but PDF is pretty common. HTML is pretty common as well. But what you see in the market is typically banded reports. Now, banded reports are pretty common, and when you think about it, each line on the report is a band. And now there's usually a number of bands on a report. There's usually like a report header, report footer, page footer, and then there's a detail section. And graphically, it's very easy to set up and visualize what it is, and usually the details section is repeating rows. So you say, here's field 1, 2, and 3, and these are just going to repeat, and then when you reach the end of the page, it just goes to the next one. And then you do groupings to be able to segment your data and do math on a field. So if you wanted to do a subtotal on, say, account balances or something, you do a grouping on account type, and then in your footer in that group, it would show up the math. But there are some definite shortcomings in the banded reports, and spanning bands is probably the biggest one. So when I say spanning bands, if you want to have some graphic object smack dab in the middle of the page, well, that might cover 4 or 5 detail bands. So it's very, very hard to get that to work sometimes. Not that it's always impossible, but it depends on the tool. Likewise, some of these tools, if you create really complex queries or you have a non-traditional data source, so in a lot of cases they expect a record set coming from a database. Well, if you've just got class data that you've generated on your own, typically what you'd have to do in that case is create a temporary table or a table that's strictly for reporting, and then do a query against that, and then send it into the report. So there's not a whole lot of options for data sources. Some of these things are not always fast, and some of that is because what it's doing is it's generating or rendering the page at the time where it creates it. So BKeeney Shorts is a little different in that it waits until the very end to do the rendering, and that can help us a lot on speed. Runtime formatting can also be a little limited on the banded reports. I mean, sure, you can go in and say, I want this field to be black, Arial, bold, whatever, but sometimes it's not easy to say, oh, but if the value of this field is less than 0, I want it to be red, or change the formatting in some other way. And another issue that many reporting tools have is they don't allow variable row heights. And the Xojo reporting tool is a very good example of this, in that if you've got text in a field that might be 2 or 3 lines, if you want to be able to see all that, you have to make sure that every line can do the 2 or 3 lines. So these are some of the shortcomings. Now, what we've come up with as far as what our reporting needs are is, we said when we were initially creating Shorts, is we wanted to work on Mac OS X, Windows, and Linux, desktop, and web apps. Now, I haven't tried this recently, but the last time I tried it did work in console apps. So that might be another option if you're trying to do reports there. It needed to be flexible so that if we wanted to do something silly like put a graphic in the middle of a page or span multiple rows, that we could do that. It needed to generate reports quickly. We came from a tool that doing a 10-page report could take a minute, and it would eat up a ton of RAM. So we decided that speed is definitely an important thing. Our reports need to be shown in a canvas and an HTML viewer, obviously, so we can do web and desktop apps. So not only can we see it on the screen via the canvas, but we can also print to the graphics object. We need to handle the varying resolutions. On the Mac, we've got 72 dots per inch, and Windows is 96 dots per inch, but then both of those platforms also have different resolutions at this point, and certainly if you're going to a printer, 1200 DPI is not out of the realm of possibility for a laser printer these days. So the reporting tool had to be capable of dealing with all those different resolutions without the developer really worrying about it. We needed to export to HTML, and this is what we're doing on the web app side so that we can display in an HTML viewer. And we also want to export to PDF. A lot of clients wanted that, so we decided just to add it. When we were doing the initial design of Shorts, we had a client that wanted to be able to search reports at runtime, meaning that if they created a 1,000-page report and they wanted to search for the word Bob, it would be able to find the pages that that word was on. And that was pretty cool. And it actually helped us kind of formulate some things for the future that we might be doing. Another requirement is had to be 100% Xojo code, and we accomplished that except for the PDF generation that's using the Monkey Bread Dyna PDF plugin. And then finally, we wanted pre-built customized viewers or customizable viewers so that people could just take it, put the viewer on their window or their web page, and be able to start customizing it. One of the things we found is that some of the tools actually had a viewer, but there was no real way or easy way of customizing it to fit the look of your application. So it was just easier to try and come up with something so that they could use on their own. So let's talk a little bit of some examples here. So in this one, we've got a Dyna PDF, or I'm sorry, a Monkey Bread chart director chart up at the top here, and then down below we've got a table section with details. Now you could do this in some of those reporting tools, the banded reporting tools. You'd probably do, this is maybe a grouping of some sort, and then you'd have to put the graphic in the group header, and then the details section would show up. So it's wouldn't necessarily be very hard, but it's not trivial either. You have to really understand how the banded reports work. If we look at example number 2 here, we've got varying row heights. And what I did in this example is under the description field, I've got 4 different sets of text that I do randomly, and it will automatically adjust the row height. Now, in this particular example, each row is actually a group item in Shorts, and it expands accordingly. So if any of the items that are inside of it expands to a certain height or width, it will expand the group as well. So the whole thing about the variable heights, not all tools do that. in example number 3 here, we've got RTF reporting. And the RTF text block is actually using formatted text control to handle all the RTF data and do all the rendering. Formatted text control has been around for a while. Lots of people use it. Shorts now has that integrated into it, and you could use that on your projects as well. In example number 4 here, we're showing how we're overlaying and spanning multiple rows. We've got a rectangle in the upper left-hand corner. We've got the rounded rect with the fill, and the square one may not be so hard in a banded reporting tool if you're going through the details, but in this report we're going through the header, which would be the page header, and going through multiple detail bands. And certainly you wouldn't be able to do that in the rounded rect example. So if we look at this example number 5, every single one of these rounded rects is a different section. And so we create this via code, and that's the drawback with shorts, is everything is done via code, and then we just place them on the window. So the job detail section, that's a group item. The printing details, that's a group item. And you can see that there's a mix of text and data and tables and graphics and all that. So it's really up to your imagination to be able to do what you want with a shorts report. Now, with all that said, Shorts has some pretty interesting stuff in it. The first thing that we did is we had to come up with a measurement system, and we decided on using points. Now, we used points because with all the different resolutions and the different platforms we're going to be using, we couldn't rely on the standard pixel. So we decided to use points. And points is a very old standard that's used in the printing industry, and 72 points equals 1 inch. So therefore we always had a constant no matter what, and then when we do our rendering we can say, okay, we're going from 1 inch to this particular display, which is either at 72, 96, or 1200 dots per inch, and it just handles it for us automatically. So the style sets, so we use style sets for formatting. And if you've worked with Web Edition at all, you will know that you kind of understand the whole thing for styles. So rather than do an individual style for every item, we come up with a style set. Now, when you apply a style set to a page, every item on there inherits that unless you override that. And because they're objects, you can't just say, oh, this style set, I'm just going to say for this one, I'm going to do make the text red. You have to clone the style set and then set the text red and then apply that to the object in question. And we already talked a little bit about group items, but when you first create a group item, its width and height are exactly 0. And so as you add items to it, it figures out what the bounds of itself are. Now, one of the strengths and weaknesses of Shorts is that you control the placement of everything. So you control the placement, you control the styles, and you control the math. So one of the questions that was asked was, how is the height of a text within a text control known? What we've done is we actually behind the scenes go into a graphics object and set the properties up along with we set the properties up and get the string height based on the width. So I hope that answers the question. Now, one of the things to be aware of with that is it definitely slows down the generation of a report, because when we do the report generation, it's got to figure that out so we can later on go, okay, here's the height of it, so now this is going on. Normally, if you don't do auto height adjustment, it's just a static height and is very, very fast. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Shorts object model. Everything in Shorts is derived from the base class. There's not really a whole lot in there. But it was easier to add some things in there like the style sets, so that everything in Shorts kind of knows everything about the style sets. So the first class is the document, and really it's a pretty simple class. It's really just an array holder. It's got an array of pages, lets you insert, append, delete pages. This is also where we tell it to render, and we'll get to that in a minute. As we go through and we add pages, and these are actually pages in the report, we add items to it. And now the items are really just what you would expect. We've got the group item. We've talked a little bit about that. Image item stores graphics. Line item draws a line. Oval item, rectangle, rounded rect. Those are the primitives that allow you to do stuff. We've got the RTF text item, which is the RTF text item. It's only available on desktop. And then we've got the text item. And now the difference between those two is that the text item, all the text that's in that block has the exact same formatting. The two classes over here in the upper right-hand corner, style set, is pretty much what you would expect. It lets us format the text, lets us format the lines, line widths, colors, etc. The fill, color, fill, whether or not it's got a fill color, and so forth. Now, the view is also kind of an interesting one because that is our class that says, here's what I'm going to. So if the view is like on the Mac and it's on a Retina display, it knows that the resolution that it has is 144 dpi. If it's going to a printer, it knows what the resolution is. So between the renderer and the view, it sort of figures out what it needs to do. And so when we're rendering, we create a instance of whatever renderer we want. So in this case, it might be the graphics renderer if we're going to a canvas or a graphics object. And we pass it in the view, and then we say render, and it spits it out. And it does this page by page, except for the Dyna-PDF renderer, which will create the entire document at a time. And we did this because generally we don't really need to see the PDF pages at a single time. The style sets are pretty straightforward. It gives us the text properties, gives us the line and fill information. And one of the things that we do is you can set a page style for a page. So when you create a new page, you can say, here's my default style. Everything that's in that page will carry that style. So if you wanted to make one page Courier and another page Helvetica, you could certainly do that and not have to worry about the individual line items or the individual text items. But then you can go in and have each item have its own style. And we talked a little bit about these styles rather than setting properties. All right, so let's go through an actual project here. All right, so we are in a little demo that we've created, and all we've done is taken the BKeeney Shorts and the Shorts desktop folders from the demo, and we've gotten the viewer that was in there, the CTL viewer, and added into a window. Now, when we start up the window, we've got a timer that starts up, and we do a create report, and we just create a new instance of our class. Now, you could easily put this in a module, but we found over the years that putting it in a class makes sense, especially if this report could be pulled from multiple areas on the screen at a given time. So in a module, it's just a singleton instance. In this case, we want everything to be in there, especially if you wanted to pass a lot of information back and forth. So let's go into our report demo and take a look at it. We only have one public method in here, and that's create report. The first thing that I like to do, and this is entirely up to you, but the first thing that I like to do is set up my styles. And we've got several properties here in the properties area that are nothing but styles. So if we go in there, we go, here's our default style. I'm going to do times at a size 9, but my title is going to be Helvetica at 14, and I'm also going to make it bold. And then subtitles, row styles, and then I've got one down here for right column style saying that when I apply this, the text alignment needs to be to the right. The next thing I do is I get our record set, and for right now we're just limiting it to 1,000 records. You can set this whatever you want. There's no hard coded limit. I have populated a million row report. I think it was 14,000 pages. It was a lot, but it took it only about a minute to create all of that, so it was pretty good. That was without the auto line height adjustment setting. We create a new instance of our document, and we set up our page size constants. This is probably something that you'll want to pass in from print settings, but for right now, this is just hard-coded. And remember, everything is in points, so we have to go in and figure out what it is, 72 dots per inch, so that we can set all this up. The next thing we do is we create an instance of our BKS Shorts page. We pass it the width and the height and the default style. You don't have to do a style, but it's helpful. And then we do some calculations to say, here's our page width. And it's nothing special. So the first real big item that we create is we create a header. And what we're doing is we're keeping an instance of this simply so that we don't have to recreate a new instance of it for every page. If you can reuse it, it makes sense. So we're doing some quick calculations to figure out what our column widths are going to be. And then we go, here's a group item, which is pretty simple. I mean, there's nothing to it. You don't have to worry about the width, height, anything else. And then we start creating text items. So we do a new text item. We give it the text, top, left, width, height, and give it the style, and then we simply append it. And then we do that for the subtitle. Down here we do a logo. We figure out some scaling dimensions. We figure out, or we create a new instance of image item, pass it in the picture, the X, Y, our width and height, and then we figure out where we're going to put it in the page header, and we simply append it. And then down here, we're creating another group item to create our headers. And so we're saying, okay, here's our text for the column header, number 01, name 05, gem 08. And we keep appending that to the column header. And now down here in the line, we create a new line item, and then we append that to the column header. And then finally, we take this column header and append it to the page header. So a group item can have other groups in it as well. So that's kind of nice to be able to combine things. So if you had a header that had an address of your company or whatever, you can make that a specific function that just returns a group item, and you can insert it wherever you want. Once we've created that, we make sure that we give the page header position, and we just append that to the page. We do some calculations as far as where is our height, or how much height do we have in this page. So we're taking the page height minus our margin, bottom margin, minus our header height, minus some fudge factor in there to give it some spacing. And then we go through and get our rows. And in this case, we're doing an array of group items, and we simply pass in the record set. We didn't really have to. We could have gotten it there, but we decided to get it here. And we're just repeating the same stuff over and over and over again. So while we have something in our record set, we create a new group, we create our text items, we give it our formatting. So in this case, here's our text item. We decided that our style is going to be the right column style. We give it our width and our height. Now this is also be where we tell it, are we going to do the auto height? So if we had auto height adjustment, it would automatically adjust the height. And then finally, we append it to our group, and the group gets added to the array. So we get all of our data up front, we get all of our lines up front, and then we go back and then we start placing it on the page. So we come up with a place where we're going to start our rows of data, and we just go through the array. We give it our left margin and our Y position. We append it to the page. And now when you want to find out the group item, how big is it, you call the bounds and then you call the height, and that way you can find out where the next thing needs to be positioned. And then if it's greater than our available height, we append the page into our document that we've already created, and then we create a new page and append the header. And then finally at the end, we append the last page. Now, we have all of our pages that are in here. What we didn't do is do any footers. So we go through, and we do this partially because we don't really know when we start how many pages we're going to have. So we iterate through our pages. And again, this is we get our page count. And then we iterate through our pages, and then we append a page footer. Now we pass in what our current page number is and what our maximum is. And if we go into the append page footer, you can see that it's just a standard create a new group item, add our text to it, add a line item to it, and then just return it. And down here, we've got our page number and page count that we've added into as the string. So that's pretty much Shorts in the nutshell. So let's run this real quick. And you can see it's created 26 pages in almost no time at all. And that's pretty darn good. And if we take the scaling, that's all rendering it at runtime. There's nothing that it's doing. It's not saving anything per se. So whenever we go to a new page, we're getting a new render. So let's search for Bob. And you can see on page 2, there should be a Bob somewhere in here. And that's Bob Rowe. Now, one of the things we'd like to be able to do in the future is to be able to click on the report and get an event back that says, here's what you clicked on, here's the data associated with it. And we haven't done that yet, but it's on the long-term list. Now, we have the options of saving to HTML. And if we just click on this, we can open it up in a browser. And you can see it looks pretty darn close, if not identical. And if we do a save to PDF, we do the same thing. You can see it does the Dyna PDF and it's got the watermark on it. So let's take a look at the code that goes into doing the save HTML and save PDF. Okay, so let's go back into the Win demo. Save the HTML. So we get our folder item. We've got our document. We're just grabbing it from the control viewer. We're getting our page from that document. And then we're setting up the view. So in this case, we're saying, here's our view, here's our scaling, now render it. And the scale is just 1.0, meaning that we're not doing anything to it. And then we create our HTML render. We give the render to the page, and you could also render to the document. We'll see that in a minute. So we pass in the render, we pass it the view, and it figures out what the folder item is, writes it to disk, and launches it. So if we go to the PDF, we do the exact same thing. We're getting the view, we're getting the render, and then we're just calling the document to render at this point. And then we tell it to launch. So the question came up, is a Dyna PDF license from MBS needed to be able to export PDFs? And if so, which edition is needed at least? Yes, you do need a license from MBS, and I believe the starter edition is more than enough to be able to do it. I think whatever the lowest license you need can do it. So let's go back here. All right. So that's Shorts in a nutshell. It is 100% Xojo code, except for the Dyna PDF plugin. We only offer unencrypted source code at this point. And it does include the formatted text control that you can use in your desktop projects. And the download that's available off of our website has desktop and web examples built into it, so you should be able to play with it a little bit without too many hassles. And right now the price is $300. We talked about long-term plans a little bit. We'd like to create a external report designer, and that is, lots of people like that one, to be able to design most of their report in some sort of designer so they don't have to do all that code. We've done a little bit of work on this. We did a web project that uses this external report concept. Web edition is such a different beast that it's hard to get it to work right. And will we offer an in-app report designer? I don't know at this point, simply because it's a lot of work and we haven't even approached it yet. And like I said, external report definitions sort of go with that. We'd like to be able to say, here's this string, and whether you save it in your database or in a file, it doesn't really matter, but here's how you set up a report. And then I think I mentioned a little earlier about runtime interaction with reports. We really like to have the idea of having a drill down report. So this is very common in accounting apps, so that you do a report for accounting, like account balances, and you've got an overall like accounts receivable account. Well, if you drill down into that, you want to do a report that shows you the details of that accounts receivable and so on. So that's something that's high on the list, but all these are long-term. Don't ask me what the date is on when we'll get that, because we just can't do that. Because we're mainly a consulting group, we do it when we need it and depending on what customers are asking. So that's Shorts in a nutshell. I will be happy to answer any questions. And if you want to ask me some more questions later on details, feel free to send one to support@BKeeney.com.
I don't see any extra questions in the Q&A list at the moment, but here they come now.
Are updates included in your licensing? At this point, they are. Our update schedule has been pretty erratic, simply because we don't have a lot of customers at this point. So the answer to that is probably for a while, but I can't answer that as far as exactly what and when. Sorry.
Bob, how many projects would you say you're using this on at the moment?
I would say we've probably got at least a dozen, if not more, projects using Shorts at this point. We're using it about equally on web and desktop projects.
All right, well, it looks like all the questions have been answered, it would appear. Although Edwin has a kind of a follow-up question here about your support page.
Yeah, I need to take a look at that. Just send me an email at support@BKeeney.com. I need to figure out what's wrong with the website.
When all else fails, email, right?
Yeah, and we recently switched our internet or website host, simply because we were having major issues, and it looks like we've still got a few that need to be taken care of. But we'll take care of that in due time. And I would invite everybody to go to the website and take a look at the demo and just start playing with it. I mean, the banded reports are quick and dirty, but they don't offer you a whole lot of flexibility. And we think Shorts is a good alternative to that. It does a lot of things that are very hard to do in a banded report, but at the same time, it's a lot more work. And we know this, and we make no, we don't intend to hide that at all, because it is a lot of code, and it does require at this point that reports are compiled into your application. Now, if we ever get around to doing the external report definition, that'll become kind of a moot point. But until we get to that, right now everything has to be compiled into the application. And okay, so another question came in is, what if a group item is larger than a page? Does it get sliced or spliced? And the answer is no. You have to take a look at the group item and figure out before you place it whether or not it's going to expand beyond the page. So you literally get to control everything.
Right, as you showed in your example, you create the group and then you'll know the height, and then you have to decide if it's on the current page or if you're creating a new page.
Yeah, it's really flexible that way, because if you wanted to do your own set of like orphan control, you could get all that on your own. I mean, so you get to determine the code for that and everything else. I mean, it can be a lot of work. The follow-up question was, is there a way to easily split such an item? Sure, you can iterate through the items in a group and start taking things out of it. And there's nothing stopping you from doing that. Iterating through a group is fairly easy. Everything's just an array, and you can get their position in the group.
All right. Well, I want to thank Bob for taking some time to show everyone BKeeney Shorts and how it can help your apps get some pretty slick reporting capabilities. And until further notice, this is the end of this webinar, and be sure to head to bikeeni.com and grab a download of BKeeney Shorts to play with. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.